Thanks so much for having me, and thanks to Janet Boland for recommending me. I'm thrilled to be interviewing Sue Monk Kidd. I felt like that was a pretty thorough bio that Rhonda already gave. The author of 8 books now, and the Book of Longings, of course, is the most recent. It's 8, right? Did I get that right? I was printing out all the covers earlier. So welcome, Sue. Thanks for coming.
Oh, well, I'm really honored that you're interviewing me, so that's a thrill.
Oh, thanks. And I'm very excited because people here in the chat are like crazy typing comments, which I love. It means everybody's very engaged. So I'll keep reading from there as we go on. Let's start at the beginning with this book. What made you write? Well, maybe quickly tell people, in case there's anyone here who doesn't know what your book is about. Can you please explain what the book is about, and then what inspired you to write it?
This is a book about Anna. So I like to make the point that it's not a book about Jesus. It's a book about Anna, who happens to marry Jesus. I think a lot of people expected that it would be the life of Jesus through the eyes of Anna, and it's not that either. So it's about her quest, I guess you'd say, her quest to have a voice in the world. She's very ambitious, and she wants to realize all of the largeness in her. She wants to be a scribe. She's a feminist when there wasn't such a thing as that word. And she's a writer. So she wants to express herself and fulfill her creative life. And so what we see is her going through many years of seeking that longing, and also her relationship with Jesus, which is very significant to her. So they have a great love, really.
And how did you come up with this? As I was reading it, I was like, this didn't really happen, right? Is this like an undiscovered story that nobody knows about, that Sue Monk Kidd somehow found? How did you come up with this?
Yeah, I dug up a jar in Egypt and I found this. That's how it happened. No, let's see. Really, Zibby, about 15 years ago or so, this idea occurred to me. It just lit in my head one day out of absolutely nowhere. It was, when you're in the shower, you get the best thoughts. It was in the shower. And I never really seriously played with that idea the way I would do later. I just noted it. And I thought maybe one day. And so the idea kind of went in a waiting room and waited all this time. And then in 2014, I was reading about the Gospel of Jesus' Wife, which is a manuscript fragment that a Harvard professor introduced to the world, really. And Jesus refers to his wife in it. Well, it turned out this is a masterful fraud. But I found that completely irrelevant, because the minute I read about it, I was so electrified by this idea. And it was like, oh, yeah. And this time, I decided I'd take it on. Earlier, I don't think I was ready. I don't think I had the courage. I don't think anyone was ready to read it. But it just seized my imagination. And I think what creativity is really about is the imagery that wells up from God knows where inside of us, the soul, the unconscious. And we play with those images. And creativity is essentially play. And I played with that idea a while and thought, yep, I'm meant to do this.
Wow. It's amazing to have that conviction and to have the idea stay with you for so long and then be able to see it all the way into everybody's hands. It's amazing. I was really taken by how many ways you expressed ideas about a woman's voice and how the voice can get out. And it starts with the Incantation Bowl that you have Anna write her prayer into. And I'll just read this little prayer for everyone. Lord our God, hear my prayer, the prayer of my heart. Bless the largeness inside me, no matter how I fear it. Bless my reed pens and my inks. Bless the words I write. May they be beautiful in your sight. May they be visible to eyes not yet born. When I am dust, sing these words over my bones. She was a voice. Oh, So beautiful. So that is sort of what propels, and you see the inside of Anna's longings through this bowl. When did you decide, or how did you think about the theme of voice and all the different ways that it can play out in the book?
It's a theme that's incredibly near and dear to me all the time. I write about this a lot. Ever since I wrote The Dance of the Dissident Daughter, I have been really concerned with particularly women having places to express their voice, or as we say, find your voice or use your voice. And I'm talking about an authentic voice, one that is really true for that individual. So it kind of is innate, I guess. It just matters to me deeply, having grown up in a little town in Georgia, South Georgia, rural area, 3,000 people in the little town when I grew up. In the 60s, I was coming of age in the 50s and 60s, pre-feminist world. I witnessed a lot of things. I mean, this is true about race too, but that's another story, which is why I wrote other books I wrote. But I think we gravitate to things because they matter to us. And so I guess it comes out of that longing, of my own longing, to say something about voice. And that Incantation Bowl was just a God's gift or something. It was just a treasure because I stumbled upon it while rummaging around on the internet. And I had gotten lost I couldn't even remember what I had Googled at that point. And there they were suddenly. And I thought, oh, here is a concrete physical object that can hold her longing. And I always like to have that, some sort of iconic something that is not just abstract, oh, my voice, but a thing that she could carry through the whole novel. So that was why the Incantation Bowl.
Interesting. So how much research did you do? How true to life? I mean, obviously it's impossible to prove, I guess, but how much did you dig up essentially that you put in here that was actually factual? Because it sounded like it was all factual, the way the writing tools and the scrolled papyri and all of the little details that you put in. Tell me about finding all of that information.
Yes, I guarantee you that's all factual because I spent 14 months researching this novel before I started writing. And I wanted so desperately to get it all right and to layer it full of rich, authentic details. So, I mean, I started by reading, of course. I collected a lot of books and just read constantly all day long for days and months. And I watched documentaries. I listened to the great courses on all kinds of topics where you have lecturers from universities giving lectures. I traveled some to museums, and I mean, there's a museum in Ireland, which of course I'm now forgetting the name of. But I walked through there, and there were all of these ivory sheets that had been beaten down that were at the same time of the first century, that I could see all of these different ways, things you could write on palm leaves. So I just walked around with a notebook for about a year and a half and recorded everything I could and learned everything I could and kept notebooks full of notes. I actually think I over-researched.
I don't know, because I feel like your book was not only a story and a love story and almost like a coming of age, but it was also a history book, because now I was just telling this to my husband. I was like, I feel like now I understand. I have a visual for that entire period of time. I can imagine, walking down these paths and how I would, what the rooms would look like. Every little thing you literally created like a perfect replica of a world that now is in my imagination and everybody else's. It's really so impressive. I know that other novels do that, but the authenticity factor is just like sky high, I have to say.
Wow.
So
well, I do know that if there is a tree or a food in that book, it was real. I would have to stop writing a lot and just look up something if I wanted to be sure that it was current at the time. It was quite something, but I sort of enjoyed the research and got a little carried away with it, probably.
Did it come from your research, the moment when Anna, and I won't give anything away, but was going through something very emotional for her and she just needed to write about, which anybody who's listening can probably identify with that feeling when you just have to write. And so she ends up breaking a pot, actually it was her aunt who broke the pot on her behalf, and she ended up writing all over the shards of pot pieces. Did people really do that? And should I go try it? What do you think? Have you tried it?
No, but I would like to. Sometimes I have tried things. I haven't tried that one. I remember when I wrote The Secret Life of Bees, I knelt on grits, which is something my character did, and that was really painful. But no, they did actually do that. Because it was an inexpensive way. Paper was, rare and precious, and people could write on, broken pottery. So.
And the idea that Anna was going to get in trouble for stealing a piece of ivory on which they used to write, the thought that a piece of paper, which seems so expendable these days. Obviously there's awareness of the trees and, we're not being unkind to the environment, but just like the prevalence of paper versus what they had to go through and all the hurdles to writing. Do you feel like, I know you referenced your childhood a little, but do you feel like you had any stumbling blocks in pursuing your career as an author? There seemed like there were so many hurdles for Anna to jump over. I'm sure they weren't that extreme, but there must be something that you can relate to in that from your own life.
Well, of course, I wanted to, Anna is, I admit, similar to me in many ways. She's probably the character I drew on more than drew on myself more than any other character I've written. But yes, I think probably the biggest hurdle for me growing up was that a failure of courage to really pursue what I wanted to do, which was to write. I think I was born to write. I feel that strongly. And I don't know if there's something innate in us. All I know is that when I was very young, I started telling people I wanted to be a writer. And it was like this little flame, a little light inside that I had. And then, of course, I lost it. And I can't not say that it wasn't something about the cultural milieu I was in too, because my guidance counselor in high school actually said to me, well, you really ought to consider doing something practical. What if something happened? This is what we heard in the 60s. What if something happened to your husband? You need something to fall back on. So this is the kind of nonsense, that we were plied with. But I was 17, 18, and I decided I would do something practical. So I studied nursing, and I got a BS degree in nursing, and I worked as a nurse until I was 30 years old. And that's when I just said, I can't do this anymore. I'm just homesick for myself, and I'm homesick for my little light. So I started writing.
That's so beautiful, being homesick for yourself. That's a great way to say that. That's amazing. So then how did you do it? How did you switch gears? And did you just walk in one day and say, I quit, and then you sat down and started writing? It couldn't have been that easy. How did you do it? And how did you go from there to a 30-year career of writing and so many successful books at that?
Well, it wasn't an overnight thing. I loved when people said The Secret Life of Bees was an overnight success, because I had been writing for so long. The Secret Life of Bees, my first novel, was published when I was 53. I started writing at 30. And the way it began was I seized my intention again, and I made an announcement to my toddlers. We're eating breakfast, and my husband, and they all looked at me like, okay, Mom. And I took a course, a writing course at the local college. And I didn't know what I was doing, really. I didn't know much about writing. I just knew that I had this impulse of the heart to do it, a passion to do it. And the way I think I developed writing was I learned everything I could about the craft. I went to writers' conferences. I read books about writing. And then I read good fiction, that intimidated the heck out of me. So it was, and just writing and writing and writing and trying to find my voice. So I freelanced and I wrote nonfiction and I wrote essays, and I did that for a while. And then I began publishing some nonfiction memoir type books. I didn't start fiction until I was in my 40s.
Wow. I feel like it's such a gift, and I think that's what draws me to talking to authors all the time. How do you create these worlds, especially even on a world that's actually our world and just in another time, and make it just so intricate and so many facets? I mean, all your characters felt so real to me, like they could just walk in the door, essentially. How do you do such a great job with character development, as one of many things that you did well, but how do you make them so real?
They're very real to me. So because maybe they're very real to me, I can transmit some of that, I hope. I write in first person. I always tell myself one day I'm going to write a book in third person, and it never happens. I always revert back to first person because it is so intimate. It allows me to just drop into the character, and I just try to see the world through her eyes and feel it with her heart. And I think I know her so well, usually, by the time I start writing. I have no idea. Part of it is probably a mystery. I just try to write the intimate spaces of her heart or the character's heart and just hope that the reader identifies with her and has the same empathetic participation that I'm having with her.
Well, you certainly succeeded. Tell me about the religious aspect. Obviously, a book about a purported wife of Jesus, you can't get away from the fact that this has religious implications for any group, any person reading the book. How did your own sort of beliefs play into the book and the story? And what do you think life would be like if this had been the actual story of the world?
Well, I think the world would be very different, to answer your last question first. That occurred to me right away. I remember thinking almost the first day that this idea struck me, not the first time, but the last time. And I remember thinking, if she existed, my God, she would be the most silenced woman in history. And it made me want to give her a voice so desperately. I grew up in this little town, as I said, where we had two churches. There was no Jewish synagogue. We only had a Methodist church and a Baptist church. So you had to belong to one or the other, or you were just, a pagan. And there were none of those. Everybody went to church. And so I was schooled in that. And I have a very distinct memory of one Sunday, I'll make this short. One Sunday, a visiting minister came to our little Baptist church. And I remember sitting by my mom. I was 11, I think. And he gave the order of the hierarchy of authority in the human world. And it was God, man, woman, children, or something like that. And I was outraged. I was just shocked and outraged and anger. And my mother later would say, I think it all started right there. And maybe so. So I had an uneasy relationship with the church, probably all through my childhood and adolescence. But at the same time, I have a very contemplative kind of soul and a longing to have a spiritual life. And I do have a spiritual life. It's just much bigger than Christianity. And I'm a cultural Christian. That metaphoric story of Christianity still speaks to me. So I have a lot of background in that, and I'm sure that showed up. There is one last thing I'll say about this, and that is there's a line in the book of Longings where Anna says something like, well, she's in this cave and she's having this conversation with Jesus. I think it's their second meeting. And she says something like, why don't we just free God? And he laughs and he says, yes, I would like to see how that happens, or something like that. Well, a lot of my religious life has been about trying to free God, our narrow concepts of God, and to give us a sense of equality in our imagery of what is divine. So I actually think and believe a lot like Anna did in this story.
The jig is up. We know all your innermost thoughts now. One of the times when Anna is talking to Jesus, she overhears him referring to God as the Father, and she hadn't heard that before. And she asks him, what's this about? Why are you calling God Father? Because at the time that hadn't happened. And he said, the practice is new to me. When my father died, I felt his absence like a wound. One night in my grief, I heard God say to me, I will be your father now. And then Anna says, God speaks to you? And he says, only in my thoughts. So I thought that was so interesting how now, of course, that's like common parlance. Everybody does it without thinking, God, the Father, blah, 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 blah. And this perhaps is where it came from. Was this part of research, or this is speculation?
Well, I think Christians probably mostly think Jesus started this, but my research showed that it was not uncommon at all for Jewish men in the first century to refer to God as Father. But it was an intimate way to do it, and the word was Abba. Mm-hmm. And Jesus, of course, made it quite popular.
And also the turn the other cheek you attribute to Mary.
Yeah, I got away with that maybe. I don't know. I think she probably had a lot to do with her son's success maybe, or who he was as a human being, which was quite amazing. And, moms don't always get the credit they're due. So I was determined that this human Mary was going to get some credit for Jesus. And he learned from her, and I had that be her line that she taught him. But he learned pretty well.
So it's Mary as the ultimate Jewish mother, apparently.
Yes.
Compelling about her son. Love it. This is just a tiny point, but one way that women were sort of asserting their will, which was they almost had nothing they could do, was taking all these herbs to prevent themselves from getting pregnant, which I didn't know they had been doing back then as a form of birth control and all the rest. Tell me about that line of research.
Oh, that was absolutely fascinating. I mean, women had a lot more access to things than we can imagine. They knew how to abort children. They knew how to take herbs to encourage getting pregnant when they were barren. They knew how to prevent pregnancies. It was a fail-proof by any means. But the midwives, the wise women they were called, typically controlled that, and women went to them. And it was sort of a secret world for them. So I'm not sure I could even tell you what all they were right now, but they were accurate in the book.
Wow.
I'm just glad we live today and not then.
No kidding. Oh my goodness. So tell me, you spend 14 months researching. Tell me about what happens after that. Do you write right in this room that we're looking at you in now?
Yeah.
Where is it? Where do you do your writing? How do you do your outlining? Tell me about the process a little more, please.
Yes, this is my writing study, I call it. And I do an outline in an unusual way, probably. I do I call it a collage, but I think there's a better term for it that's more literary. It's probably a storyboard. No, it's something else. But anyway, I will take all kind of postcards and like I'm a child at kindergarten. And I cut out images that speak to me, that actually hook my unconscious. This is how I do every novel. So I'm very visual, and they could be huge boards that I'll put up with all of these images all over them. And they evoke something for me. It could be emotion. It could be a character. It could be some piece of something that a description, but mostly it's about the story itself and how that narrative is going to unfold in the book. So I start with that. And then I like to know two things when I start writing. And until I know them, I can't really start writing. And they are, who is my character? Who is she? It's usually a she. And I will spend a lot of time trying to figure that out. And the other question is, what does she want? And that is the seminal question for me. If I know what my character wants, I can write the book, because it's all about that for me. And I write down the opening scene. I know the last scene usually, and sort of vaguely what's going to happen in the between. And then I start writing.
Wow. And how long did that take, at least for this book?
Well, the whole thing took 4.5 years, counting that research. So another 3 years.
Wow.
Oh, I'm slow, Zibby.
Whatever you're doing, it's working. Don't change a thing. It's the pace you need to keep.
It's a meticulous process, yeah.
Someone in the comments is saying how much they'd love to see the board for this book. Do you still have it, the vision board?
Oh, of course, yeah. I have it somewhere. It's buried in the closet. But I'm creating a new one now that I can't even talk about. Don't even ask me because it's so new. But another thing I do is I create what I call a plot clothesline, and I have a line and I hang the scenes on it, and I can move them around. And because often, like with the invention of wings, I had two narrators, two main characters, and I had to have two clotheslines. So I do things like that, to help me navigate the story and keep up with what's going on.
That's great. I can just imagine you with your little clothes hooks, or what are those called? Laundry hooks, whatever. That's fantastic. So you can't say a word about your new book? How about a little something?
It's not a historical novel. I tell you what it isn't. It's not a historical novel. So I've done, the last two were going back further and further in time. No, but I'm going to write pretty much close to the present. And oh my, what else could I say that's really vague?
Is it post-COVID, pre-COVID, or do you not address COVID? I know that's been a topic of conversation.
Well, it was set shortly before COVID, but I have to think about that, whether we're going to include that or not. I think this is going to be a big question for authors.
Yes. Do you have, I know you've given lots of tips already about the way you approach learning how to write, but would you have advice for other aspiring authors at this point?
Well, authors always have a little bit of advice, and it's typically things like read a lot. My advice about reading is read at the level you want to write, which is why it's so intimidating. And then realize that you can never achieve that idea in your head, and that it's always going to come out less than you imagined. Let yourself write badly initially. And for me, it's all about rewriting, and I rewrite as I go. A lot of writers say don't do that, but that's the only way I can do it. I need to get it just right for myself before I can go on. So when I finish a book, it's pretty much done.
That's good.
Well, it took 3.5, 4 years. Yeah.
Well, I want to open it up to questions because a lot of questions have come in and I'm sure more will come. So I don't want to monopolize you. Let's see. Someone is saying, I was a writing, like, I don't know if I should say the name. Somebody named Laura is saying, I was a writing major in college and then my life detoured and I went to seminary and was a Baptist pastor for 10 years. For years, my writing was devotional material and sermons every week. I gave it up and have been a stay-at-home mom for 13 years. I'm 48 and I'm just discovering Sue's books and I feel something being lit within me. Is it too late for me to find my voice as a writer?
Absolutely not. I can't tell you how strongly I feel about that. You have all the time in the world to do that. You're just 48. My goodness, you're young. I mean, seriously, you might as well search for your voice and begin writing. Why not? If that's the passion of your heart, absolutely do it. And I don't think it's ever too late. People call me a late bloomer. I believe in late blooming.
Somebody's saying, by the way, that Mary was a great mother-in-law in this book, just FYI.
Yeah, she was.
See. Please. Someone said, I love the character. This is from Janet. I love the character of Yatha. Is there someone in your life who has been your Yatha?
Well, yes, in a way. Not when I was young. I mean, I had my grandmother, who I'm named for, Grandmother Sue, who was rather feisty. And I can't claim her as a full-blown Yatha, but she inspired me. She was the only one. My mom was great. She was like the consummate mother. And she would win Mother of the Year award. She was fabulous. But she said later in life, she read Dissident Daughter and learned her feminism. And I love that. My father said, well, you ruined your mother. And I said, well, my mission is accomplished then. Because she really, well, she found the dance, let's say it like that. But Yatha, my Yatha is probably three women. So we have a quartet of women who meet every year for the last 15 years. And we support each other, we dare each other, we help each other the best we can to midwife one another's dreams and passions and journeys, and particularly their creative lives. And they are collectively my Yatha. So I have taken every book to them that I plan to write, and I'll say, do you think I can do this? You think I can write about American slavery? And they'll go, of course, you better go do that. Come on, girl, So we try to give one another courage and make one another brave. So we all need somebody like that, even if it's a group of women. And if not, you got to find a Yatha in yourself.
I want to tap into your group of women now. I want to come to your meetings now. I'm kidding. You sound like pretty amazing women. How many attempts did it take when first writing before your manuscripts were accepted for publishing?
Oh my goodness. Let me tell you, my novels, because I had been writing for a long time, I don't know, maybe it was just a stroke of luck. My first novel was published on the first try, which was a shock to me, believe me. However, I have had my share of rejection when I first started. And I'll tell you a couple of them. One of them was an essay that I wrote. It probably wasn't very good. I hadn't been writing very long, but it wasn't terrible either. And I sent it to a small magazine, and I got a rejection letter that said, it was a form letter, but at the bottom was written, "This is useless," with an exclamation point. So, that can take the heart out of you a little bit when you're new and you're struggling to find your way. And then when I finally, in my 40s, took the idea for The Secret Life of Bees to a writers' conference. It was my first writers' conference as a fiction writer. And my teacher said he didn't think it had any potential as a novel. He said, try to make it into a short story. Maybe you'll have a little luck there. So I did. I turned that first chapter of The Secret Life of Bees that I had written into a short story. It was published in a tiny academic literary journal. They paid me $35 and 10 free copies. And I put it away for 3 years. And it was by just a serendipity that I actually pulled it back out and read it somewhere. And there happened to be an agent in the audience who came up and said, literally said, I hope that's the first chapter of your novel. And I said, well, it is now. So that was how that happened. So, you're going to have setbacks, and you just have to have the conviction of your heart and not pin everything on whether it gets published, but on just the journey. And I'm a little long-winded tonight. I don't know why. But one more thing. Be an apprentice. That's a concept that's kind of lost to people now, but why not do that? I think in the Middle Ages, an apprentice was 7 years or something like that. And I told myself I'm going to be an apprentice. And I just learned the craft as much as I could. And I think there's the craft that you can learn. It's possible. And then there is this other thing that is hard to describe that I call the madness or the soulfulness of the work that you have to feed, and you put them together and you write.
Wow. Well, you should make this like an ad for anybody who wants to write, like an ad for writing in general, in case there aren't enough aspiring authors out there. Kat is asking, you incorporate ritual a lot in your writing and seem to come up with some creative rituals to commemorate moments and occasions. How do you come up with them? And what is it that you find helpful about these rituals?
I do believe in the transforming power of a ritual, of a really good ritual, if you believe in it. And, women particularly, it's a transaction. It's one of the more mysterious transactions in the human soul, is this ability to enact something and have it make a real change in your life or a deep impression in your life that then sets you on a new course. So rituals have been important in my life. How do I think of them? I have no idea. I mean, I think that I've alluded to this earlier, but I think that creativity is essentially playing with ideas and playing with imagery. And it's somewhere in that process that these rituals come out of, I mean, sometimes I'll think, what's the next scene about? Now what should Anna do? And part of that is very methodical and logical, as in dominoes falling in a plot, because that's how plots go, it's causative. But then there's this little magical thing you're trying to think of. And sometimes I just close my eyes and lay on the floor and dream about it. That's how I came up with Anna giving Jesus a haircut. So you just go wind through your imagination. Let it browse. Let your imagination browse.
Laura is asking, is there a possibility of Book of Longings coming to the screen, and would you want it to?
I don't know if there's going to be a possibility of that or not. I mean, I'm always open to it. The Secret Life of Bees movie was a good experience for me. I think sometimes they're good experiences for authors and sometimes they're not. Mine have been pretty good. Even The Mermaid Chair was a television movie that I thought they did a pretty good job. It's, adapting. This one, I don't know. I think my answer is I don't know if it's going to happen or not. But if we get the right offer, I don't mean monetarily, I mean as in director or writer. That's the crucial thing. I'd consider it.
At least one more question here, and I'm glad that somebody wrote this because I meant to ask you this myself about the character Tabitha, who was an amazing character in the story. Someone is saying, hoping to hear about the spark for the important role Tabitha and her story played in the book.
Well, that is kind of an interesting story, I think, because she did not exist in the initial draft of the part 1 of the book. I had written part 1, I was into part 2, and I went back and I read the first part and I thought something might be missing, but I couldn't. It was something about the dimensions of my character, Anna. I didn't realize she needed a friend, but she needed a friend. And I was watching the Kavanaugh hearings at the time on television. They made me very angry. So I felt a lot of outrage about that. And sometimes writers will actually take all that anger and put it right into their work or their grief or whatever. And that's what I did. I knew it was the only good thing that came out of the Kavanaugh hearings for me, was this character. And I knew instantly that I would write her, that Anna would have a friend, and I knew what would happen to her. And I knew that she would have to find her voice. And it was a lyre, it was music. And that Anna would write her story because she needed to be believed. So that's how she happened. And I was so glad that I was able to give her friend, and because then it allowed me to create this community, this coalition of women that I love to write about. And Anna deserved a family in the end. And what better family, than a community of women like my girlfriends that support one another and love one another.
That's amazing. Well, I don't want to go over time here. Thank you so much. Someone's saying, by the way, the ending for Anna was very satisfying, in case you were worrying about that. So satisfying ending all around.
I'm very glad to hear that.
And other comments thanking you for everything and all the rest, and how brave you are writing, and how inspirational, and just all of it. So, and
can I just thank all of them and say thank you for being readers and for reading my work. If you do, I appreciate it very much. I do not take one of you for granted. And I think about my readers when I'm writing a lot. What would they like to hear? What do they need? That's why my endings will never be really tragic. You can count on that.
Well, I want to thank you, Sue, for coming here, and also Zibby for being such an amazing moderator. This has been a wonderful discussion. I think all of us want to go and write books now, take our anger out and make something beautiful out of it like you did. Just such an incredible discussion we had tonight. So thank you so much, and thank everybody here for participating and for supporting the friends, and for reading and supporting literature. We hope to see you again at our next speaker series event. We're going to host a talk with Julie Oranger She's going to discuss her book, The Flight Portfolio. And that event is going to take place on Zoom on September 16th at 7:30. So be safe and well, everyone. And thank you again so much for everything. Thank you, Sue.
Thank you.
Someone just said in the comments, Sue Monk Kid, she is a voice. And then someone said, amen to that.
Oh, mwah.
And they want you to please keep writing.
That will not be a problem.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.